The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for April the 3rd, 2018 is now in session. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd ask you now to join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We now have an agenda, Council. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Tom, I'll make a motion. I'd like to, I have a question on Budget Amendment 11, moving that money over. Since we can't use that, I would suggest we go ahead to the next project for the capital improvement committee.
I would pull that item 11 out of the consent agenda and put it under new business. We can discuss it at that time.
That'd be good.
Is that all right?
Yes.
So, removing item number 11, add as item D under new business, I would ask for approval of the amended consent agenda. Do I have a motion, Council?
I'll make a motion. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
What is it for?
We're going to move the budget amendment number 11, which is in the consent agenda right now. Gary has a question about it, and I think would like to discuss it.
Okay.
Going to move that down to new business under item D. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion is made and carried to move that down to new business item D. Town planner?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief report for you all tonight for the month of March. There were 16 zoning permits issued, 57 building permits issued. Those consisted of one single-family dwelling, 5 additions, 2 remodels, 2 addition remodels, 3 repairs, 7 accessories, and 38 others. There are currently 20 single-family dwellings under construction in the town, and the total amount of fees collected in March was $14,728.10. With respect to the next planning board meeting, that'll be April 16th. There are 4 applications to consider. One is ZTA-1803, a zoning text amendment request submitted by the Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department to amend the Southern Shores Town Code by amending section 36163, 36165, and 36-205 to establish parking, signage, and setback requirements for fire stations. The second is a zoning text amendment request submitted by the town of Southern Shores as directed by the town council to amend the Southern Shores Town Code by amending section 36-202 to establish new lot coverage requirements. The third is ZTA-1805, a zoning text amendment request submitted by 5415 OBX LLC to amend the Southern Shores Town Code by amending section 3657, 36163, and 36-207 to establish ice cream shops as a conditional use in the C General Commercial Zoning District and applicable parking requirements. And lastly, the last application is CUP 1801, a conditional use permit application submitted by 5415 OBX LLC to open an ice cream shop with a drive-through at 5415 North Croatan Highway. And that's the lot in between the bank on the corner of Juniper and Wells Fargo. At the last, or the March 16th, or March 6th, rather, town council meeting, council asked me to research the possibility of adding additional regulations for small cell wireless facilities. Specifically, additional regulations and whether or not the town can charge wireless providers for locating small cell wireless facilities in the town right-of-way. The town adopted the small cell or amended our wireless ordinance to include small cell wireless facilities provisions per the legislation adopted last year by the General Assembly. So I posted an inquiry on the NC Plan listserv and I only received 6 responses. Only one of the respondents, which was the town of Matthews, said that they had adopted additional regulations. Examples of their additional regulations include an encroachment agreement must be issued by the Public Works Director before installation of any new poles in the right-of-way. The second, no new utility pole may be installed for the principal use of wireless facilities if a pole exists within 20 feet of a desired location. And when I say pole, this refers to utility poles in a right-of-way. Third, the minimum distance of a new pole from any residential structure shall be at least 150% of the pole height and shall not be located directly in front of any residential structure located in a single-family zoning district. The next, along streets within subdivisions where there are no existing utility poles, which means everything would be underground utilities, wireless facilities may be attached to streetlights in the public right-of-way. Another, new poles may not be erected in a residential area solely for wireless communication equipment attachment unless the applicant has demonstrated that it cannot reasonably provide service by, and there's 3 subsections to that, installing poles outside of the residential area, attaching equipment to existing poles within the right-of-way, or installing poles in rights-of-way not contiguous to parcels used for single-family residential purposes. The respondent also stated that they are already getting pushback from the wireless providers on their distance requirements, which I just went over. With respect to charging wireless providers to use the town right-of-way or utility poles in the town right-of-way, none of the respondents stated that they were charging wireless providers. Our language states that the town may charge a right-of-way charge, but the charge can exceed the charges imposed on other users of the right-of-way, including publicly, cooperatively, or municipally owned facilities or utilities. We don't currently charge Dominion or Charter, so I don't believe we can start charging wireless providers at this point. Locally, only the town of Duck has adopted zoning requirements for small cell wireless facilities, and the extent of their legal review was minimal and mostly based on the statutes, as was ours. Lastly, to conclude my report, with respect to Verizon small cell wireless applications, I noted at the last meeting that Verizon had already contacted us about submitting applications for facilities, which they did last week. We received applications from Verizon to co-locate 8 small cell wireless facilities on 8 existing utility poles in the town. 5 of the poles are located in the town right-of-way, and I've got a picture here of one of the plans. And you can see here, this proposal, this is 37.6 feet. You have the existing utility pole, the antennas posted on top. You've got a wireless equipment cabinet that's mounted to the pole on the side. And you've got additional small pieces, amps, meters, and whatnot posted on the pole as well. All 8 include this type of setup. And I think the tallest one they proposed, I think, was like 41 feet. I think this shortest one was maybe 34. The ordinance allows it to go, the pole to go 50, and then they give an additional 10 feet for the antenna on top. So they're under that, but we've started our review to make sure it's in compliance with our ordinance. If y'all have any questions, I'll try to answer them for you.
Any questions, council?
Where would one of these locations be, or where we have power poles, obviously, with
The
Ocean
location,
Boulevard?
yeah, I have the address of all the locations or the proximity of all of them. The first one is at the intersection of Duck Road and 5th Avenue. That's on the left side. That's NCDOT right-of-way, or it might actually be private property. I've got to go look and see. Number 2 is 89 Skyline, which is in the town right-of-way. Number 3 is 10 Skyline, which is the pole right here out the window by the cul-de-sac. Number 4 is 222 Ocean Boulevard, town right-of-way. That's on the ocean side, just north of, I believe, East Dogwood. And number 5 is 29 East Dogwood Trail, which is across from the SSVFD on East Dogwood. Number 6, 8 Hickory Trail. That's in the town right-of-way. That's kind of across from where it intersects with Ocean Boulevard.
Is that on a pole that's existing?
These are on, all 8
Now,
are
they're
on.
taking those poles out.
They're using the existing pole from what I
I
understand.
understand, but Dominican came to us, 6 months ago, and their plan is to take all of that through Hickory out and all of that back in. I mean, that's,
That would kill this then. I haven't heard that, but,
well, they came to us to ask for use of right-of-way.
I see. We can follow up with that and see where that goes. Number 7 is at 8 Fifth Avenue. That's near the T at the end. And then the last one is 10 8th Avenue, also town right-of-way property towards the end of the T.
Any other questions for Wes?
Yes. I do. I would suggest that we go ahead and charge Wes with coming up with a code about placement for these poles. I went inland this past week and saw them in Charlotte and Raleigh, and they're everywhere down in the cities, and they're just, a utility pole with an antenna on top. And I don't think our residents where we have no, well, and the other thing is our other utilities are underground. So did they talk about at all a fall zone? I know we talked about that last time.
They
specify the
The
height.
respondent that I saw, they didn't use the word fall zone exactly. The minimum distance of a new pole from any residential structure shall be at least 150% of the pole height. So that's similar to that. It's almost like a fall zone, but it just doesn't use that terminology.
Okay, and something to the effect that, they just couldn't pop poles up down the road where we have existing underground utilities, because we're working toward going to all underground utilities.
And if I may, one of the sections that I read through, I know it was a lot to take in, but it addresses new poles in areas where there are no poles now. And that's where it says that, you have to meet certain criteria. So we could easily try to incorporate that into our ordinance.
And I know we had at least one resident at the last meeting concerned about the frequencies and lack of information we had with that. So I would say we charge him to go ahead and maybe get with Ben and come up with a code. And let's bring it back and put it in place.
You want to make a motion to that?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Do I have a second to Gary's motion?
second
Any further discussion?
I just want to be clear what the motion is.
That he develop a code for use of those wireless communication poles. Regulations.
Did the ordinance from the state or the guidelines from the state not always have that? Or are you, I'm not trying to buck
It
you
allows,
here, I'm
it
just trying
allows
to
the town
understand.
to have more restrictive,
Okay,
and that's what I want us to do, is have more restrictive guidelines. We're an underground community as far as our
Right.
utilities, and, well, you live on Duck Woods Drive, there's no poles down through there, and they could just stick them anywhere and everywhere in the right-of-way.
that's what I'm trying to be clear on. Does it, as it's currently written, allow them to place poles wherever they want?
Yes.
Yes.
Then I'm all on board with what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Ben, do you have any thoughts on this issue?
Yes. But we can look at it, but like I said at the last meeting, I think you're really going to be limited in your ability to do that. You're going to have some showing, the fall zone may fall into the category of public safety, which is one area, but just we want to not have them in the neighborhood. That's exactly what this statute is telling you can't do.
But the statute says that if they can do it some other way,
I don't think the statute says that. I don't recall seeing that in the statute.
Is the statute also talk about, it seems to me I'm hearing a lot about discriminating. So we can't charge them where we don't charge others, and we can't discriminate as to how we do it. But if we were to, and I think we brought it up before, just say no overhead poles, no poles whatsoever in the town, and ask Verizon to come up with a phase-out plan, which doesn't sound like it's a big deal anyways. Dominion, sorry. And not allow anybody to do it. Does that, and we can't control the NCDOT, right? I mean,
Right.
that's not in our, we can't deal with that.
We can't control 12.
But we're not gonna preference one versus another, nobody can have it. Because we're close to being, not having any anyways, right?
Well, we're closed except for some parts of town. We still have a number of utility poles on Ocean Boulevard.
Right.
But that might be an NCDOT.
Wax Myrtle has
When
utility.
Dominion came in and spoke to us about
They,
the
I'll let you finish.
area over there, what street were they on?
They were talking about Beech Tree and Holly and
Okay, they were talking about taking those out, and he said that, eventually, they wanted to take everything, put it underground, because
Right.
it's more effective for them. I mean, they have less repair for us than they do anywhere else, because all of it's underground. So they basically, what I assumed was he was saying, they have a plan. It wouldn't be like in 1 year, it's going to be a 10-year plan or more of putting everything, all utilities underground in Southern Shores.
But maybe they'd be able to write a letter to that effect.
Yeah.
That by a certain, over a certain period of time, it's gonna be phased out. And, you may have to, Wes, approve the short term, you may have to approve this because they meet the letter of it. But they need to know that the pole in 10 years,
Might not.
due to this phase-out program, might not even be there, and you may not be able to put it back.
And in 10 years, the technology may
Yeah,
change
that's
to
all.
where you don't need it.
Yeah, right.
And based on just my limited experience with this situation, I think you'll find it's going to probably be 10 years, but who knows?
That's okay.
Maybe we'll be lucky. I have a motion and a second, and we've discussed it. All in favor of having staff look into this issue? Aye. All in favor? 5-0, Wes. I should apologize to you. Our town clerk is away this week, and our town planner is filling in and doing two jobs, as you can see. Our next speaker should be David Cole, our police chief, but he's also away. So I'm going to go to our fire chief, Ed Limbacher, for his report. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, everybody. So the month of March Fire Department report, Fire Department responded to 3 structure fires, 1 cooking fire. Wes, if we can go to the next page on that. There you go. 1 trash and brush fire on Duck Road, 4 patient assist, 22 EMS calls, 4 motor vehicle accidents with no injuries, 1 gasoline spill, 1 LP gas leak, 1 electrical problem, 2 public service, and 1 CO activation, for a total of 42 calls last month. And that's it. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions, Council? Thank you, Ed.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you.
Our town manager's report, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Just a brief update on your approved Capitol Street projects that are capital improvements for this particular fiscal year. Palmetto Lane, as you can tell if you've ridden by, is in the process of being top coated now and finished. Clamshell Trail is in the process of being paved. Skyline Road is near completion. Basically has been completed. There are punch list items there, including the vegetation spray and the stormwater swale there. Yopon Trail, the northernmost section of bulkheading, has been completed. As you recall, that's the only section we could conduct outside of the during the current moratorium for finfish in the primary nursery area. So there won't be any more activity. There cannot be any more activity at Yopon Trail until the moratorium is lifted in the fall. Just to let you know, also, the Government Education Access Channels Committee has awarded the town its local programming development initiative grant. This year, that grant is $7,742 for improvements here in the Pitt Center, as we try to do annually. I did want to bring the council's attention to one matter. As budget officer, it's projected that this year there will be remaining funds in the code right line dealing with the town code update. Right now, we project it'll be around $16,867 at the end of this year. That is a legally obligated amount. It will need to roll over to the next budget year for that legal obligation. Also, a similar process would need to occur with the fire department's funds that have been legally obligated for the fire department's architect. Right now, the balance is $214,900. Unless more invoices come in from the architect between now and June 30th, that amount could go down, but any of those two balances would need to be reappropriated after July 1, because they'll revert in the fund balance as of June 30th. So those are the two that we project at this point that will be legally obligated and remaining funds on June 30th. So I just want to bring that to your attention. And I'll be glad to try to answer any questions on operations.
Council?
I just to be clear, so those funds, the 200 and some thousand, it's gonna, at the end of the fiscal year, will go into the general fund temporarily, and then we'll reappropriate it for the same.
It will go into unassigned fund
unassigned
balance.
And then we'll go ahead and
And
we'll
we'll-
immediately assign it to the same category.
That's correct. The council will need to reappropriate that after July 1.
But we have no choice, because
It's legally obligated,
okay.
yeah.
Do we know when we're putting the projected budget for next year out?
Yes, you'll get expenses and revenues at your April 17th budget session.
So when will it be published?
And it'll be
Posted.
filed on the first meeting of May. It'll be posted. Once I file it, it'll be available for public comment and public inspection.
When do you anticipate getting from the revenues?
We've almost got them completed, and hopefully we'll have them by next week, so they'll be obviously in your packet for your April 17th meeting. Yes.
How soon will we get those before the meeting?
Probably the same time. It'll be that Tuesday or Wednesday, a week ahead.
Because we need to look at those. We can do this later, but I think we need to look at, we missed our meeting last month. We canceled that one, which was to be a workshop budget type.
Expense workshop, right?
We may need to reschedule one in May. I'm thinking the public needs more than one opportunity to give us input on that. Just thinking out loud, it'd be good to have that budget, be able to study it, and then have it out to the public so they can see what we're doing as far as, because, we've got a lot of items on our fire department, bike pads, things of that sort, that I'm sure we're going to get a lot of input to.
I'm not opposed to that. We're going to have a full day meeting here on this one in April.
Right, I
To
understand.
discuss the income and the outgo.
So that's the working meeting.
That's a working meeting, that's
And then
right.
we've got, but that's not the only opportunity, right? We'll have the May meeting to follow.
Yes, it'll be filed, the first meeting, the first Tuesday in May, and the public will have the entire month, of course, to review the budget. And then there'll be a public hearing, the first meeting in June.
So there's actually 3 meetings.
And then the public, and the council can either adopt that night or not adopt that night, as long as it adopts by the end of June.
I think it would be ample opportunity, Gary, people to look at the budget and look at the numbers.
I disagree with that, because when you come in and the budget gives, the public gives you input, and then you expect to, you're at a timeline, you've got to pass it by June 30.
gives us almost 3 months.
It gives us 3 months, but we're not in public session where public can come up and speak about what they've seen, and if they don't get it until May 1st.
Wait, they'll get it, we'll have it by, let me make sure, that's a good question. We'll have it by the April workshop, right?
Well, you'll have revenues and expenses at the April workshop.
Okay.
You will not have, you'll have a balanced budget from me, the first month, Tuesday night in May. That'll be
Right.
my proposed budget.
But in fact, and maybe we need to do a little more to publicize that first meeting so that folks come to it. I know it's in the middle of the day and it's kind of difficult, but that's the big one, because that's where we start to allocate priorities.
But they won't have it to review before they come there, is what I'm saying. I mean, we're gonna have it, we're gonna have budget, well, we're gonna have revenue. and-
You're only going to have revenues and expenses. You will not have them compiled as a budget, as a formal budget.
That's my point.
I see what you're saying. I mean,
And we are, we spend a lot of money.
what would be the,
I'm just saying.
I'm feeling like it's enough, but at the same time, would we have the ability, if we needed to add a meeting in June, mid-June, if we felt like we couldn't get to that point, or we started hearing, at the June meeting, we started hearing some objections or some
June
new
or,
items, then we
June
could,
or May,
well, but I mean,
depending on when we get it out.
We can always add a meeting.
I just think it'd be nice for the public to have the opportunity to review what's there,
Nobody's arguing that.
and then have us,
We're just talking more about timing.
right.
Let's go through our April meeting.
Well, we planned it when we did our calendar, that we would,
Do 2 meetings.
we'd do March and April. That way, we were way ahead of that June deadline. It seems like we're always backed up against the wall of, okay, we gotta have a budget by June 30. And we keep pushing it back to the end.
but the hard part is too, you're right, first of all, but if we don't have the revenues, and that's none of our fault. It's just the nature of it, then the timeline's always compressed. There's
But you
nothing we
can,
do about it.
you know what you did last year, you know what you did the year before, you can project and put a budget together.
That's correct, but it won't be,
It'll be close, or it should be if you're accurate in how you project. Just saying.
We'll know in April. I mean, I guess I don't. I'm not-
You're asking us to project what the county's going to provide us as far as income, and we can't do that. We cannot do that. We cannot base it on last year, the year before, and not have anything to work with. We don't know what's going to happen with taxes to our neighboring communities.
That's true.
I think we made a good choice in not meeting for an expense budget session. I think we can make a good choice by meeting for expenses and income in this month, and if we need to have a May meeting, we'll have a May meeting.
Let's
I have
go
no
through
problem.
it.
We can make that decision once Peter's given us the numbers we need to work with. That's where I'm coming from with this thing. Let him provide the information that we need, and then we'll decide how much more interest the public has in it, what they need to know. That, as much as we can give them is obviously good, but right now, we're just throwing darts at the target. The target's not there.
Well, and we don't want to either spend more or cut more than we have to.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we want to, so to that extent, that made sense not having the meeting, because we just don't know what the monies we have. So I guess I'd support the mayor, I don't mind having it if we need it, but at this point, I'm not sure if we need it.
Let's make the decision after the April meeting, the mid-meeting this month, if we want to have a May meeting.
Depends on what we get. If we don't have the budget in April,
You'll have numbers, expense and expense and income numbers for us in April. He'll have those numbers. He's told us he'll have most of them by next week, he thinks. And he said he'd provide them to us at that time.
Also, I think that's the big one, in the sense of maybe we can do Peters or something we could do, I'm just brainstorming in terms of outreach, because that's the one we really want folks to come to. That's the one where we're setting priorities, and it's a tough one, it's during the week, but we can adjust things really easily at that point, and that way we don't get ourselves back into that corner, so I guess that's a question I have.
well, and that's my point. We need to put it out there so people have the opportunity to see it, and people have the opportunity to study it. You can't just sit down and look at it in one night and then come up with a solution on what you're doing. I like to look it over and play with it, and I don't have it, and I'm on the council.
Yep, I understand.
Second question I have for you, Peter, is, and I guess this is a place to ask it, no left turn. Where are we on that? And do we have a timeline as far as established when we're going to do the trial part? And how are we going to communicate that out to the public?
The staff is proposing to do it the third weekend in June, the 23rd and 24th. And recall that I'd reported to the council before that I was bringing to you a proposed budget amendment to pay for it. We're still compiling the actual figures for that, and I had proposed to bring it to you as an agenda item in May so that the public could be fully apprised of what you wanted to do on that.
And how are we going to communicate that to the communities, the realtors?
The same way we're doing everything else. Put it out on our website and try to publicize it through the news media.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter. Town Attorney's report.
I don't have anything to report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Planning Board report of the March meeting. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My report tonight will be maybe a little longer than normal. So the first item is commercial design standards. If you remember, months ago, we identified some more complex issues that needed to be identified, and one of them was commercial design standards. The survey, there were 2 questions that touched on commercial design standards, and one of them, the question was, the town code should regulate design standards for new or updated commercial development. 68% of the respondents agreed with that statement. And then another question stated, which is more important for the town code to address commercial design standards or encouraging new businesses to open, and 60% of those respondents said design standards were more important. And when I talk about design standards, examples include standards for facades or the roof, or building materials, windows, color, porches, awnings, building size, or building orientation. Currently, the town code does not have any commercial design standards in it, although DUC, KDH, and NAG's Ed do have commercial design standards. As far as commercial lots go, there are a few, 3 or 4 undeveloped commercial lots available, and one of them is across from Islander Flag down next to Gingite Creek. There is some lots behind the Goodwill and this little strip mall. It's in here, and I don't know where the other one is. Okay, besides Southern Shores Realty. But the existing commercial buildings, most of them have some variation in their design standards. If you think about the Marketplace or Southern Shores Crossing, the exceptions are this little strip mall here and the Goodwill store, and those are basically brick facades, the strip mall flat roof, big windows. And so if you're interested in developing commercial design standards for the town, one of the questions is, do we want to maintain the character of the town? And should the town have commercial design standards? And if the answers of those are yes, then the next question is, what design elements does the town want? And if the answer is yes, who should develop those standards? If you consider that you want citizen input, the planning board recommends that the council appoint a task force to develop those commercial design standards, similar to the Dogwoods Task Force. And that would assure a wide variety of folks that are interested, and that's the planning board's recommendation on commercial design standards. The last meeting that we had, we considered 3 variance requests and 1 zoning text amendment request.
Sam,
And
could I
two- yes.
interrupt you?
Sure.
I have a question on those design standards.
Mhm.
If we develop design standards, what are you going to do about the people that already have businesses like the?
Oh, they would be grandfathered in. The commercial lots that are vacant would have to abide by them if they decided to develop those. And any redevelopment, if you look at the marketplace, that is a number of years old. In the ETJ area down in front of Martins Point, those buildings, I don't know how old they are, but none of them are very new. And as far as the one over here, Mike, how old are you building? So those aren't as old as some of them. But anyway, at some point in the future, you know, they'll have to be redeveloped. And so that's what we're looking at down the road. The next thing, any other questions?
Did
on
the code
commercial-
rewrite, did he put any design standards in his rewrite? Any codes to affect?
Yes, he did, and the planning board didn't like them very much.
Why?
They were pretty general, and we didn't think that they totally reflected Southern Shores.
Okay.
I've got one quick question. The survey that you referenced, is that the one that was put out as part of that code rewrite process in the very beginning?
Yes.
There, Sam, I mean, we don't, I guess the question I'd have is, we don't have very many lots even, that this even applies to. Redevelopment would be the concern.
He said just 4 parcels or something.
4 parcels, so, I mean,
Yeah, there are about 3 or 4 empty commercial lots, and then there are the lots that are developed that will, at some point in the future, need to be redeveloped if they're going to stay. Well, it's still going to be commercial lots.
okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Sam, if you'd like.
As far as variance requests, I mentioned we had 3 at the last meeting. 2 of those, variance request 18-0-1 and 18-02, and they were for side yard setbacks on a 50-foot wide lot. They were for 155 Ocean Boulevard, Lot 9, and Lot 10. And as far as a little bit of background on those, the side yard setbacks on 50-foot wide lots was identified as an issue in the review of the Town Code Update Project. The Planning Board discussed it and decided that the Board of Adjustment could handle those on a case-by-case basis. The request was for going from a 15-foot wide side yard setback to a 12-foot wide side yard setback, and the Planning Board approved the variance requests for both 18-01 and 18-02. As part of that discussion, the Planning Board also discussed the possible changes to the character of the town of Southern Shores as more and more of these 50-foot wide lots come up for redevelopment. And there was strong support for maintaining the character of the town of Southern Shores. In those 50-foot wide lots, just a little bit of background on those, there's 80 or 100 of those in town. A lot of people don't realize how many of those lots are available. They're all non-conforming because they were platted before the town was formed, and so the minimum lot size now is a 100-foot wide, 20,000 square foot lot. So those are all non-conforming lots, and there's a lot of houses on those 50-foot wide lots. Along the oceanfront particularly, some of those houses well, a lot of them are on, most of them are on 2-foot wide lots, and some of them are on 3 or 4 wide lots. And then you get back away from the ocean front, and there's a lot of the houses that are also on 2 50-foot wide lots. And a lot of those lots, most of those lots are not combined. They're just separate lots that people have built on. The current town requirements for non-conforming lots is if you're going to build one house on 2 lots, you have to combine those lots to make them conforming lots. But the town code is silent, non-existent, on if you want to take those single house off 2 lots and develop those as 2 separate lots. There's nothing in the town code that addresses those. And so the planning board feels that the development or redevelopment of 50-foot wide lots needs to be addressed by town council because it's going to significantly affect the character of the town.
What defines combining 2 50-foot lots? Who defines that? Does the county? Or?
No, those lots are platted already, recorded in county records, and the town set the minimum lot size as a 100-foot wide lot with at least 20,000 square feet. And the town's policy has been that to reduce nonconformities in whatever area for the town. And in my mind, and Ben probably knows better than this, that if somebody has one house on 2 50-foot wide lots and they decide to develop those as separate lots, in my mind, they can do that. So, and if they can do that, then, you know, I think the town needs to look at the whole issue of the redevelopment of those lots and the impact on the character of the town.
Ben, can you add to that?
Sure, I can add to it a fair amount, but I figure we
I
were
mean,
going to discuss
if
it
we have a
later in new
code,
business.
and let me, I'm not clear. We say it's 100-foot, and I know you're gonna go there, Tom, and I just wanna get clear on this other matter before we do. So if we say you gotta have a 100-foot lot, but we have those that were grandfathered, once that they are redeveloped, they should fall under our code of a 100-foot lot, shouldn't they?
If a house is on 2 adjacent 50-foot wide lots
Right.
or more, 3 or 4, when they redevelop that lot, and if they still want the same situation of one house on multiple lots, they have to combine those lots. If they have one house on 2 adjacent lots, and they want to redevelop it as 2 separate lots, there are 2 separate lots there. If they want to develop each of those lots separately, right now, there's nothing in the town code that says anything about them
But does the code not,
having to combine those.
but the code does not say that we have a minimum 100-foot lot or 20,000 square
It
feet?
does, but these were platted before the town
But
came
it's
into
like, if
existence.
somebody goes to West, and I built a house in 1978 out here, or Mike's got those old houses, when they renovate those old houses, they have to meet today's code, not older code.
They have, if they're building something, they have to meet the code. In other words, the code says you have to have a 15-foot wide setback on the sides, you have to have a 20.
Right.
They have to meet all the setbacks. And the reason that we're getting these variances, and we've talked about this before, when we've talked about these 50-foot wide lots, is that if you have a 15-foot side setback on those lots, that leaves you a 20-foot wide house,
Right.
which is not much larger than a single wide trailer.
Well, small houses are the thing now.
They're small. So the variances come in, and even by requesting 12-foot wide setbacks, that 20-foot house now becomes a 26-foot wide.
Okay, and I got a question for you, but I want Ben to weigh in
can
on
we-
that. I
Would you
want
mind dealing, we got this on the new business. Can we,
Wait on
Ben to weigh in.
What's the question? I mean, do you want
Are
me
they
to?
not, they're grandfathered when we established 100 feet, 20,000 square feet lots. When they change, do they not have to meet our code at that point?
They do have to meet your code, but your code answers the question that they don't have to have a 100-foot lot. There's a
So our
You have
code
a-
needs to be changed to address that.
That's what we're talking about.
Well, it can be changed to address that, but part of the reason why it's there is because if someone does have a 50-foot lot, and you tell them they cannot build on it because they have to have a 100-foot lot, you're going to have to buy the lot. Because what that will ultimately be is a taking without just compensation.
exactly.
So you have to, that's why you have nonconformities that are addressed and grandfathered in over time. But where you get to the limited one where you're gonna make it so it's completely undevelopable, then you're gonna have a potential issue. So what the ordinance currently does is says, if you've got an old 50-foot platted lot and you've got one of them,
Right.
you can build a single-family residence on it, whether
Okay.
or not it meets area requirements or width requirements. But you've got to deal with still setback requirements and lot coverage requirements. But area and width, you don't have to worry about, because you're probably not gonna meet, you're clearly not gonna meet the width if you're a 50-foot lot.
Okay.
But where the issue comes in and has come up more recently is where there are two lots next to each other, or there are two lots in multiple ownership next to each other, or there are two lots that have previously had one house on them, and now the house has been demolished, and each one of the lots has been sold to somebody else, and somebody else now has an older non-conforming lot. Under the current wording of it, they can build on each of those, as long as the ownership's separate. If, it's pretty complicated, but I'll try and step through it.
Do you have anything else in your report? Can we finish up the planning board? We'll just move this up then.
Yeah,
Is
I've got more in my report.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
Ben, finish with.
well, the way it works is there are exceptions to that rule. And the first one is that if there are two or more adjacent vacant, non-conforming lots that are in single ownership, then you have to treat those as if they're a whole lot. You have to add them up. Now, if they add up and you have multiple, you should be able to treat it as multiple. The problem with that one is that there's this language about shall be treated as a single lot or several lots that meet the minimum requirements. If it just said single lot, it's really easy. You just stick them all together and you can build a house, and you don't have, it doesn't matter where you stick the house. But because of the several lots language, Wes and I have some minor disagreement on what that means. My perspective on it is, because it's an exception to this prior rule that you can build, is that once you meet the requirements for one group of lots, say you had 10, you could build it on several lots that all meet the current requirements as they are combined. So that's how I read that. But the question of recombination that Sam is talking about, where you actually have to go to the Register of Deeds office and record a plat
Right.
that actually takes these lots out of existence and makes a new lot that is platted, only comes up when there is a non-conforming lot that is adjacent to one or more conforming lots under the same ownership. So you gotta have non-conforming next to conforming, not non-conforming next to non-conforming. So that
Right.
makes it more complicated. Same ownership. And then you have to have a proposed building that is going to go across the line. So you're not required to recombine, like filing a plat with the Register of Deeds office, until those 3 or 4 things fall into place. And then there's another provision that requires an actual recombination. That's when a non-conforming lot is adjacent to one or more lots under the same ownership, and when any portion of a proposed structure required use is located on 2 or more lots. So you have to recombine if you're gonna cross the lines, and if everybody owned, and if one person owns both sides of the lines. And you have to and that doesn't matter whether it's conforming or non-conforming in that language. But you can see, stepping through this, the only way to deal with it is to take each one as it comes up and look at the facts and see what the realities are and see how it falls into the ordinance. And I think what you'll see is when we get to this portion about discussing, I think there's room for improvement on that.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Go ahead, Sam.
Aren't you glad you asked?
I am. I have another question for you on that. You said you do those 50-foot lots case by case, and, 20-foot wide house. When you buy a 50-foot lot, you know what the code is, and you're stuck. If I would say either change the code to whatever you're giving these folks as a variance, or stick to the code as it is.
Gary,
If we're,
excuse me, we're going to discuss all this
okay,
a little further down, and when the council gets a chance to look at it, can we hold this till then?
I can
Thank
resum
you.
it.
I appreciate it. Sam, go ahead.
The next thing I wanted to mention was variance request 18-03. And this was an encroachment of a rear yard setback at 46 Spindrift Trail. And the background on that was the applicant requested the variance to allow a previously constructed cantilevered deck and a ground level deck and the stairs associated with the ground level deck to encroach on the 25-foot rear setback requirement. The cantilevered deck was permitted and approved by the town in 1999, and at that point it encroached on the rear setback. The ground level deck was built in 2004. It was not permitted, but anything that is less than 30 inches high may encroach on a setback, but it still counts against lot coverage. Now, part of that deck was higher than 30 inches. 39, I think, was the highest. So, anyway, the bottom line was when the the Board of Adjustment, we denied the variance request. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was the zoning text amendment 18-01 to permit shared parking as a conditional use in the commercial zone. And the purpose was to allow shared parking among the same or adjacent commercial lots as a conditional use in the commercial zone when peak hours of operation differ. And as an explanation of that is different businesses require a different number of parking spaces. For example, a restaurant requires more parking spaces than a beauty salon or a barber shop. And the parking spaces required for one use may be used to meet the parking requirements of another on the same or on contiguous commercial parcels when the peak hours of operation and the parking demands occur at different times of the day. So if you've got a situation where you need more parking at dinner time at a restaurant and the existing lot can't handle it, you can come up with an agreement with an adjacent lot owner that they can park on that lot because their hours of operations are different. And also as part of that, if that happens, the two property owners have to provide safe pedestrian crossings between the two lots, and they also have to come up with an agreement that between the two of them that is in a registrable form with the courthouse, that before it is final, they have to run it by the town so the town can look at it to see that it still meets town code. And the planning board recommends, they found it to be consistent with the land use plan, and they recommend approval of ZTA 18-01 for shared parking. And I think that concludes my report for this evening. Any questions?
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This time we'll open general public comment, if you've signed up for it. Thank you. Mike Stone?
Mike Stone, 8 Sandfield Court, Southern Shores. It's my understanding and my father, Frank Stone's understanding, that the 50-foot lots development was not the intention, and it was not the intention of the town when it was formed. Your ordinance sets forth the date of 1981 when it addresses non-conforming lots. I believe Ben and the planning board misunderstood part of this because it expresses exceptions in the first part of section 36-132 regarding non-conforming. If you take that exceptions out so that you read it in full, it clearly addresses that if you have two or more 50-foot lots, you have to combine at least two of those properties together. You cannot create a hardship on yourself. State law says it's illegal to create a hardship on yourself, and the town's ordinances can be enforced on anybody that divides a 100-foot lot into two 50-foot lots. So that is something that is enforceable. Basically, it's in your code in that one section right there. It says, if on or after July 7th, 1981, two or more adjacent, vacant, non-conforming lots are in single ownership at any time, and such lots individually have less frontage, area, or width than the minimum requirement of the district in which such lots are located, then such lots shall be considered and treated as a single lot or several lots if you have 50-foot lots that meet the minimum requirements of this chapter and the district in which it is located. Further on in your ordinance, it clearly states that a lot must be 20,000 square feet when it's one or more individual lots, with a minimum lot frontage, when possible, of 100 feet. It's all clearly stated in your ordinance. And if you read section 36-132A1, remove the exception part in the very first part of the paragraph. If you read it slowly and do not cruise through it reading it, you more clearly understand that in the sections underneath it. They clearly says that you cannot divide a 50-foot lot. There are currently developers now that are already buying property here potentially to divide it into 50-foot lots. You need to put a moratorium on and address fill on lot property so that it doesn't overflow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Andrew Darling? Good evening.
Good evening. This is pretty simple. I tend to walk around the town, and I've noticed that some of our streets are in need of some repair. In particular, that was quick.
Go ahead.
We'll give you an extra 5 seconds, no worries.
Oh, thank you. I won't need it. In particular, South Dogwoods has got a lot of potholes appearing everywhere, and also Hillcrest, not in your end of the town, but north of Hickory, there's a lot of potholes forming on the streets. And I was wondering if we had any intention to put some asphalt in those and fix them up so we don't ruin tires. That's it.
Thank you, Andrew.
I didn't need the 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Matt Neal? Good afternoon, Matt.
How you guys doing? I probably won't need 3 minutes either, since we're probably going to have a long discussion in a minute. But I'm in agreement with Mike, the current ordinance. It's fairly clear. It's just a matter of the way you read it. As a builder, I've had to exercise 3 recombination plats in the last 3 years on these 100-foot lots that we purchase, we tear down houses, we build a new house on it. It's a fairly straightforward process. Wes is very easy to help and deal with it. I think the issue in the current zoning and what everybody's arguing about is the trigger of when that recombination plat needs to occur. If you're tearing down a house on a lot that's on single ownership, it's 2 50-foot lots, 100-foot of road frontage, and you're tearing that house down, that's redevelopment. Recombination plat needs to occur when you get a demo permit. Clean it up right there. I wouldn't address specifically 50-foot lots because there are those outliers where people have inherited them and you don't want to hem them in, and as Ben mentioned, then you're having to purchase it from them. But if you tighten that threshold for when that recombination plat has to occur, you'll solve the problem right there, and it's really meeting the intent of the ordinance as written, so I don't think you'll have any controversy. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing under old business, under new business. You didn't sign up, George.
I know the topics you talked about.
You have another opportunity. You have another opportunity. We'll have another public comment. Be sure you sign up. Thank you. Under new business, we have 1 vacancy on our planning board to be filled. I would ask if anyone has at this time a nomination for someone to fill that vacancy.
Could I ask a question before you get started? I understand the planning board's hours have changed. They're going to be doing it during business hours. And there's some concern there from some people that work, and they can't attend those meetings during working hours, and they would prefer that, and I agree with them, that any of these public-type meetings should be done after business hours so the public can attend, and also the people that we are trying to solicit to volunteer for the planning board in the future will be more apt to volunteer because a lot of those people are working. They're well-qualified people, and we need those kind of people on the planning board, and they will not be able to serve if the meetings aren't held after hours.
Now, I go to planning board meetings pretty often, and they've always met in the evenings.
Mr. Mayor.
5:30, 5 o'clock.
That's not the case. Staff put out polled some of the members to see if they would be amenable to meeting some days for staffing purposes. Nothing's been changed.
Okay.
Nothing's changed.
I mean, unless the council wants to establish policies for the planning board, the chairman and the planning board set their own times and meeting times. But staff polled some of the members to see if they would be, what times of the day they would be willing to meet for staffing purposes.
You get people there.
Yeah, we have 1 staff member who attends all 3 current active commissions and boards of the town, so we were making a poll for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's not the case.
Does that address your question, Fred? I don't.
So why would you even have any meeting during business hours? Why wouldn't all meetings be?
If we have the staff members to do it, we can. Sometimes we run short of staff members if they have to sit here for 4-hour meetings at night for more than 1 meeting a month.
So,
We have planning board and board of adjustment, and if they're meeting several times a month, sometimes we'll run short on staffing.
why can't we adjust staff meetings hours on those days? They come in 4 hours later or something like that.
We can try that. But nothing
the
has been,
reason-
I'm not sure how that's gotten around, but that's not the case. We just put a query out to the planning board members themselves.
The reason I'm concerned, we're here to serve the public and not for the staff's convenience. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just stating a fact. And we can adjust staff hours to accommodate them. But our first priority is to accommodate the public and those volunteers, because if we're not careful, it's going to be hard to get volunteers in the future if they know that they're going to have to miss meetings in order, you know, they're gonna have to go to meetings during the day and they can't do it.
And if the council wants to direct planning board times, it certainly can do that. Right now, the planning board chooses its own times to meet.
We have a planning board chair here. I think we should ask him that question. Sam?
Currently, the regular planning board meetings are the third Monday of each month, starting at 5:30.
Okay.
Now, with the review of the town code update materials that we were asked to review, we've been holding 2 meetings a month, and the one on module 1 review for the town code update, we've held on the first Monday of the month, starting at 5:30. Now, this coming month, this month, we have a meeting that actually is starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and going to 5 to try to hurry this module 1 review along towards completion. Other than that, the regular meeting is the third Monday of the month from 5:30 to whenever. Now, the thing that Peter's talking about is that there was a survey done with the current planning board as to whether it would be possible for the planning board to meet during the week, during, regular business hours. Nothing has been finalized. I don't know what the results of the survey are. Some planning board members I expect to make it, some planning board members I expect will not be able to make it. And once the results of that survey is in, a decision will be made, as Peter said, when to have the meeting. But I would really discourage the council from setting the times for the planning board. Since I've been on the planning board, the times have been adjusted at least twice. And it was dependent on the availability of planning board members to attend.
Let's go.
During those meetings, when you meet with the staff, do you need a quorum?
If you need a quorum anytime you meet.
So it's a regular planning board meeting where you need to have a quorum then, when you meet with staff?
Anytime the planning board meets, whether it's a special meeting or a regular meeting, and these meetings on the town code update, those are special meetings. The regular meetings are the third Mondays of the month. Anytime the planning board meets, you have to have a quorum. The same with the Board of Adjustment, you have to have a quorum for the Board of Adjustment. Now, it's a little more complicated for the Board of Adjustment, because the applicant has the ability to say they don't want their case heard if there are only 4 members, which is a quorum, rather than 5 members.
Can 1 or 2 planning board members meet with the town staff instead of the whole board to accomplish the same goal in going over the code
No.
rewrite?
No.
Okay.
So Fred, it sounds, I'm hearing that for the most part, they do have their meetings at night with the exception of the special meetings, which is similar to what we do.
Yes.
For example, our workshop. Does that satisfy your thoughts?
Yeah, I just didn't want the meetings to turn into, during business hours, so that it'll preclude, volunteers, people from the public from attending, or volunteers on the planning board. I don't have a problem with special meetings. I agree, we have them occasionally.
Just one last comment, and that's as far as membership on the planning board. As long as I've been a member, it has always been difficult to get volunteers to participate on the planning board.
Who's been on the phone?
And we're always looking for good people to volunteer.
Yep. Okay. Yep, I just didn't want anything to inhibit people from wanting to volunteer. So your explanation's good.
Tom, can we move? I'm going to make a motion that we nominate Carlos. He's been on there the longest as an alternate to the planning board.
I have a nomination.
That's a law.
Carlos,
That's on the agenda now, right? Carlos Gomez, I'm sorry.
Carlos Gomez, yeah.
We have 2 applicants here, and I just asked Wes, who's been on there the longest as an alternate? And that seems to have been our criteria for the last while, so I'll nominate Carlos.
So can I
You have,
nominate
yes,
somebody
you
else?
can nominate someone else if you'd like. yeah.
I'd like to nominate Glenn Weeder to fill that post.
Any other nominations, council?
So how are we going to do this? We're going to vote on each one, or?
We're going to vote on each one of them.
Okay.
The one that gets the most votes, I guess, gets the job.
First one to get a majority.
We're not going to follow the precedence of who has served the longest is going to be the planning board member.
We're gonna
We
allow
did that
council.
for Joe McGraw, as I recall. He served forever, and we finally made him a full-time member. Don't
Well,
you
I-
think that's the fair way to do it? We set a precedence, Tom.
I think it comes down to who we think is the best on the planning board. I think Glenn Weeder would be.
Well, how can you say that Carlos Gomez is not? I mean, he's in the field.
I didn't say anything about Carlos. I said I think Glenn Weeder is a better candidate.
We have two nominations for the planning board position, Carlos Gomez and Glenn Weeder. I'll ask for votes, for a vote on the first nomination first. All those in favor of placing Carlos Gomez on the planning board as a regular member, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. That's two votes for Carlos Gomez. All those in favor of placing Glenn Weeder on the planning board as a regular member, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Unless I'm mistaken, we have a new planning board member, a regular member in the form of Glenn Weeder.
First person to get a majority is the.
Well, that was Glenn. Okay. So Glenn's been elected to serve on the, been nominated to serve and elected to serve on the planning board. Item B, Pelican Watch request, tab 3 in your book, council. We have a gentleman here tonight to speak to us about their request, and I've asked him to come up and talk to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. I'm Gabe Rocky. I'm the president of the Pelican Watch Masters Homeowners Association. I assume that you gentlemen are in receipt of our written request that we provided to Peter earlier, week before last. We also consulted, began consultation with Mr. Roscoe 2 days after Nor'easter Riley on 7 March, when we surveyed the damage, and I called a special meeting of the board to discuss our options. We consulted with Mr. Wilson of Coastal Engineering, who later observed the damage and also, I believe, met with you, Mr. Rasco. And I would assume that Mr. Rasco has informed you of Mr. Wilson's position. Is that?
We've had emails, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we are now in turtle nesting season, and we will not be able to address this issue until the season ends. We still petition the council to restore the dunes as soon as CAMA allows. We will monitor the situation throughout turtle nesting season, and if the dunes survive the hurricane season, we will restore them again as soon as allowed by CAMA, with your approval, of course. Of note are the minimal height of the eastern face of the dunes, which approached less than 4 feet high in the vicinity of 26 Pelican Watch Way. When I purchased, my wife and I purchased 9 Pelican Watch in 2001, those dunes exceeded 15 feet in height. I'm sure that you will monitor the situation just as much as I do as we get through this dangerous hurricane season. Additionally, we request that the town remove the debris on the public trust beach, particularly the lumber, much of which has rusted exposed nails and rusted iron pipe that pose a clear danger to the public. Again, we will monitor the situation. I take, Mr. Mayor, your recommendation on sand fences, and I will carry that back to the board. But we do petition to restore the dunes to their position prior to Riley. Nothing more. As I was talking to you earlier, the sand fences that the town was kind enough to put in were placed at the base of the dune. Some of those fences are now over 15 feet away from the base of the dune. There was no restoration done to the dunes. The engineered beach, we were told, was designed to keep the water off the dunes. And that is why, one of the reasons why, there was no restoration to the dunes. I just placed that before you. You heard it. We discussed this ad nauseum a year ago. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate your consideration. And we hope that we survive this difficult time ahead of us. Do you have any questions of me, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Rocky, appreciate it.
Can I
Glad
ask
to be
a
here.
question?
Hope y'all have a great day.
Sure, if you'd like.
Excuse me?
I'd like to ask a question.
Certainly.
What is it that you're asking the town to do? Because the information that was provided to us, including the letters and emails from Pelican's Watch, reference doing a beach push out there.
No. We are asking right here, is asking approval of the council to allow the association to restore the dunes at Pelican Watch. The dunes were damaged and suffered ocean overwatch from the nor'easter named Riley on March 2, 3, 4, and 5. The scope of the work is to put back the sand that came off the dunes, not to do a beach push. We understand that we aren't allowed to use bulldozers. And as we went out to contractors, we can get a small excavator that is just a little bit larger than a Bobcat. And we understand that we aren't allowed to move any sand further than 10 feet, I believe it is, east of the existing sand fences. And we can't take more than 12 inches of sand below the bottom of the existing sand fences. So that's what we're asking to do.
So you're,
I understood this.
let me ask Jim, because thank you for asking that. So you're saying what you want to do is take a large Bobcat, basically, go out there and push the sand that the sand fences have built up into your dune?
Only 1 foot.
Right, the 12 inches.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is the sand in the public?
Hang on,
Mr. Mayor.
Let's let, excuse me, guys, let's let Peter's been working with
If
that.
I might, if I could ask him, the president, a few questions. Gabe, it was my understanding prior to today that the association was seeking permission from the town to do what you just described,
Yes, sir.
but that also you, if depending this permission, that you were going to seek an exemption from the Division of Coastal Management to go ahead and do it now. Is that not the case?
Not really. You know, that's not my understanding, okay?
Okay, because if you do
The
it,
reason I say that is because we have spoken to CAMA. And CAMA has basically said, no. Not maybe, but no, we understand that.
right,
We obey the laws, and so we're going to have to ride this out and do the best we can.
so that being the case, then there wouldn't be, the coastal management folks would not allow mechanical track equipment on the beach until after the turtle moratorium, and that would be in the fall. Is that understood?
Yes.
Okay, so
I mean,
I-
that's what I'm saying. We're going to have to go all the way through to November.
Okay.
And we're going to have to hopefully weather the hurricane season, and with a 4-foot dune, we have a real danger that they will be breached, and you're going to have the Atlantic Ocean going across Highway 12 and into Southern Shores Realty.
So, Mr. Mayor, with that being the case, I would just make a recommendation to the council that you not consider anything further on this today, but wait, as he says, until the fall, and they resubmit, if they would like, to ask permission at that time. But they still have to meet the ordinance that you adopted. But right now, we had told them last week that anything that you did would still be contingent on what CAMA told them, and this is the first I've heard that CAMA basically told them something definitively. So at this point, I would suggest to you that it's really a moot issue.
Tom, I make a motion to what Peter said.
Yeah, I would say the motion we're going to make is that you bring this back to us in October.
Yeah,
The same request.
possibly
If-
September or whenever.
September, October, so we can have time to
whenever.
consider it.
Now, please realize that we'll be asking for exactly the same thing, so I hope
Well,
that you
Well,
keep.
let me just say this, Gary. I hope you'll take my limited knowledge here of council and say, do that sand fencing and double it up. Put where it is now and higher, and then go back further into the dune itself.
Yeah, that makes very good sense to me, and you brought it to my
You've
attention.
seen
I didn't
what's
know
been-
we were allowed to even get on the public trust beach. That's basically what we've been told, is that it's your beach, and we can't do anything.
If you get with Peter, he can tell you where you can put sand fence and where you can't out there in front of that. And right now, with the wind, the way it's been blowing, you see how much it's built up and along our sand fence. And if you go to Black Pelican in that area, you see what that's built.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, that sand that built up is the sand that came off of the
That's
12 feet of
exactly
dune.
right.
It wasn't blown in from the northeast.
Well, actually,
I'm not sure that's accurate, because I've seen this up and down the beach where it looks to me like what happened is that all this beach renourishment was done in front of Pelican Watch and slightly northward, in Duck and in Kitty Hawk.
Yes, sir.
The elevation of a lot of beaches in Southern Shores has raised. And I've talked to some CAMA officials about that, and it's sand, and even the coastal engineer that gave a presentation at the last council meeting, all that sand is from these renourished areas, and it's doing exactly.
It could be, in fact, part of the 65% of the sand that we were briefed on, that will move in the wash bowl.
Well, my point was.
But the
is that
12 feet of
It-
dune that has eroded since Riley is unmistakable.
There is a lot of sand, my point that I was trying to make, there is a lot of sand that has been pushed up to the base of that dune.
Oh, I believe so, and that's why we had been informed that we could only take 12 inches, which basically would leave another 4 feet of sand that wasn't there when you put those sand fences down. We aren't asking to go all the way down and do anything to the engineered beach. We're just trying to get some sand back up on a 4-foot-high dune.
We understand that.
I'd like
Okay,
to
well-
second Gary's motion.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, council? All in favor of having Mr. Rocky come back to us in September?
September, October, whatever
Right,
the
whatever
conditions.
suits your schedule.
Exactly, and I'm sure y'all will be monitoring the situation too,
Yes,
and
we
we'll
are.
see when it's necessary to come back. We just need to, if you decide to approve such a restoration, then we need to be able to act quickly when turtle nesting season is over.
Right.
The 1st of November. That's all I'm saying.
In the meantime, I would highly recommend you taking it back to your board over there and see if they would put some sand fencing up out there.
Exactly, that's what I was saying. Mr. Mayor brought that to my attention prior to the meeting today.
Yes.
And I told him that I would gladly take that back to the board.
Well,
It
it's
makes sense to me.
It's working really well in Kitty Hawk, it's working well in Gill Level Hills, and it's working well in front of that part of our beach.
Yeah, but I have the approval, I can do that. I can go on the public trust beach.
No.
No.
You can go to, at the base of that dune and put up sand fencing.
Okay, where does the public trust beach begin?
He can give you where, or have Public Works meet with somebody and show them where. The other thing, I was gonna ask you, Mr. Rocky, you've talked about CAMA. Are you aware how long it takes to get a CAMA permit?
We, unfortunately,
Because I know,
I've been one of these guys that I can't get out of my job, and we've been conversing with CAMA for decades.
it can be a
It-
6-month
it can-
process.
It can be a
of-
long time, but we also have developed a relationship with CAMA.
Good.
Okay, so it's not a stranger walking in the door asking for something that we have not tried to coordinate previously to ensure that we grease the skid, so to speak, as good as we can to request. They can always deny, obviously.
Right. And we can have Public Works meet someone out there and show them exactly what they can and can't do.
That'd be fine.
Yes, sir.
Like I say, I need to gather my board together. I don't rule in an authoritarian manner, and I will bring the board together. And it just makes common sense, that we do that if we're allowed to do that, because we need to do everything we can to protect the
Save
town
what-
of Southern Shores as well as our private property.
Save what you have there, to save what you have there.
Has your board, and has your board discussed the possibility of Shipswatch bringing in sand from outside the area?
We put over $25,000 worth of sand, okay, in there before.
Well, I mean, but after, but at this point, have they looked at that?
We have already spent over $55,000 in trucking sand in on the east side of that thing to no avail. It is, we don't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars that it would take. Have we discussed it? Yes, we discussed it.
Okay, that was what.
Was that before or after the nourishment?
That was before the nourishment. On two separate occasions, when we had nor'easters, I think back in 2009, we had a huge storm. We've had several, as you know, storms that have took out the pier as well as other things. And we truck sand in, and the bottom line is it doesn't last long enough to sit there and seat properly. We just lose it right back out.
Unfortunately, our beach depth there, width of the beach from the dune out to the mean high water, mean low water mark was not, there wasn't enough sand to stop that water from coming in and tearing that dune out.
Well, the beach looks beautiful today. I've been out there walking it. It depends on what day you're there. And we provided pictorial evidence, and Peter had actually provided us with pictorial evidence. I believe we're working together. I hope we are.
Yeah, if I could make a clarification for y'all's knowledge, the material I sent you, after I conversed with Ken Wilson twice on this, the idea of going down 12 inches is not sinking the blade in at the eastward side 12 inches. It's starting at grade out there and then pushing ahead so that when you finish, it's at 12. And that would maintain this current engineered slope that's there. If they go down 12 inches out there and dig a hole that's 12 inches the whole way, it's going to be a hole there. So I did want to clarify that.
Obviously, the contractor will have to clearly understand what the specifications are, because that will be included in the estimate that they provide us.
Right.
How much time is it going to take? Is there special equipment that's required, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly, we would have to be working closely with the town to ensure that we completely understand that. Thank you again for your
Thank you,
time.
sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Peter, I have one question. Looking at this photo, do we have any plans to, and I was down there the other day, do we have any plans to add more sand fence to let it build up more?
Well, the policy that the town has been, or the practice that the town's been operating under town-wide is to encourage owners to put sand fencing up. And in this particular location, we did not have planned yet to put town sand fencing up. We were going to attempt to encourage owners, just as he said, to try to do it themselves so they would know what they got and put it down the way they wanted it put down. In particular, in this location, there's still a question about where the public trust beach starts, as you heard. So that's been our practice so far.
Tom, I would say, and I don't know if anybody will back me on this, I'd say, looking at that, with that sand fence under the ground, completely understand, I would make a motion that we direct Peter to, if we can find
I
the
got a
money.
motion on the floor already, but we haven't voted on the first motion.
Okay, go ahead.
We have a motion to have him come back in the fall for reconsideration of his request.
I thought we voted.
All in favor? We had a second, so I'm asking for all in favor. Now, Gary, if you got another
I would
motion.
think we could put, since we spent $1 million out there to protect our beach, maybe go back and add another layer of sand fence to see if it would build up even more over the next months and help save those dunes as well as our beach. I don't know if that would work, but we could certainly check with Ken Wilson and see if he thinks that would be feasible or whatever. But, I mean, that might give us an
Seems to have worked.
opportunity. It seems to.
It's working. It's working really well. Peter, you have some thoughts about the cost of that?
It cost the town about $11,000 to do the 2,500 feet in the project. So I can't, at the top of my head, I'm not sure what his length is here.
You're talking $10,000, $12,000,
Yeah.
roughly.
I'll go ahead and, I agree with Gary that it does seem to be working. If we can buy them some time, and maybe we don't have to do
A push.
the push later on. I mean, I don't want to start pushing, I don't want to get in the habit of start pushing the sand around. So if we can capture that sand,
And understand, I don't want to change what our policy's been in the past, but this is a beach that we have put a huge investment into, and I don't want to lose it.
Well, I think
And-
though
and-
that-
Any
and we
quicker than we
also,
would.
as you know, we're in a special tax zone and are paying
Right.
ourselves to help y'all
Right.
in this particular project. I personally am charged over $700 a year, specifically for that one instance.
So, Mr. McDonald, as I understand your motion, you're wanting to do the sand fencing for the Pelicans Watch.
I want to put another line of sand fencing up if, and like I said, check with Ken and see if he thinks that's feasible. Those engineers know more about it than I do, but it looks like it's working to build up because it's underground. And I remember when it was put in.
4 feet above ground.
yeah.
And if we can put another layer there and it
We
build up.
being the town.
Yes. We put that layer there too, Jim.
Yes, I know that. That was part of the CAMA permitting process.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think, Jim?
I'm just getting at who's paying for it, the town or the property owners?
I made a motion that we, the town, do that.
I'd like to see the property owners pay for the fencing for this. I mean, the town did do it earlier. It's buried now, which is a good sign, not necessarily because of the sand
I
fencing.
understand.
Well, and
Dick, let me just ask this to you.
yes,
Would you consider sharing this cost with the town?
Certainly. I'm not here demanding anything, Mr. Mayor.
I understand.
I'm sitting up there trying to protect the private property, okay, and the communal property, potentially, of this town. I think we can certainly work together to try to find an amicable solution. Mike Johnston is my Secretary Treasurer. Unfortunately, he is preparing for surgery tomorrow and could not be here. He is a permanent resident of Southern Shores.
Right.
And he and Mr. Rasco work together, as well as other members of the town staff on a regular basis.
You have a motion.
In a second.
In a second. I'd like to amend your motion to ask Peter, to allow Peter to negotiate with the Pelican Watch people to share some of the cost of this, whether it's 50%, 40%, 60%. Would you object to that?
I don't object to it, but I don't want it to hold it up. Okay.
As I said, you know, we're paying $150,000 to help in the first place, so You know, I'm open to anything,
All right.
but whatever help we can
What's your
get.
pleasure, council? What are
how
your
would-
thoughts, Jim?
Well, first, if the town were to pay for it or cost share with it, which year's budget would it come out of? This year's budget?
Yes.
It'd have to come out of this year's budget, and that would be my next query of the council. My recommendation, if you pass the motion, I would ask that you move to allow transfer from the current capital improvement funds for, I would just recommend $6,000 now to the beach stabilization line, and see if the council could ask now, would they commit to $6,000 worth? If not, the full amount would be, I would have to say, to be safe, it would be $12,000. But it would need to come from somewhere to pay for it, because those lines are almost depleted now. The storm cleanup line and the beach stabilization line is almost just about all completed, depleted. So we would need to move some money.
We can do that.
So the motion is that we put sand fencing up, and does the mayor's amendment is part of that?
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just don't want that to hold us up, Jim.
Which says up to $6,000.
Right.
Up to $6,000, the town will commit to that, and in a timely manner, right?
And if negotiations doesn't work out, we'll talk about it in the next council meeting.
Right.
Or we can do $6,000 worth of work. We can.
Well, like I say, you know, I'm amenable to trying to find a contractor to do it, and, you
We
know,
can do it.
we can go out there and hunt around, and maybe I can get somebody to do it that's licensed at a fee that may be less than what Peter can get, or vice versa. The public works people may know so many people that they could get it for a much better price than I could.
Let's make sure what we're agreeing
Okay,
to.
we're doing it.
All right, we're making sure we agree to do up to $6,000 towards sand fencing for the public trust beach in front of the Pelican Watch Dunes. Pelican Watch Dunes.
I'd recommend to you that part of the motion would be for those funds to be transferred from the capital improvement, street capital improvement line to the beach stabilization line.
All right. We got that, everybody?
10-4.
As part of that motion?
You
Do I have a
got that,
second? Do
Wes?
I have a second to the amended motion and as Peter has also amended it?
Also.
Any further discussion?
Yeah. Are we setting a precedent for others to come in and ask for help in installing sand fences? There are other parts of the beach.
That's a good question, Fred, and we discussed that, about whether that is setting a precedent. Just like the beach nourishment project itself,
Yeah.
we tried to set a precedent there. We expected the homeowners, the property owners adjacent to that beach to help pay for it, and they did. The question that Peter was just asking a minute ago is where the public trust part starts and where the private part begins.
If I could also interject, if we got queried that at town hall, which we will and we do, in this particular case, I would make the delineation that this is the engineered, publicly nourished beach only. So we'll get the calls from outside that area, why don't you put sand fencing in front of my house? And we
I'd
can
want you to.
make that demarcation that it's the publicly nourished public beach that we're committing
As I
to.
look from Pelican Watch north, you can clearly see that much of the sand fence that has been installed in the initial install is not nearly, as covered as these are. You clearly can see the sand fencing going up another.
I tend to disagree
mile.
with you. I own property on Ocean Boulevard, and at the intersection of East Dogwood and Ocean Boulevard, those sand fences are almost covered.
Good.
I was over there
I'm
yesterday.
just saying what I can see. I mean, I haven't
Call for a vote,
I haven't
Tom.
walked.
Tom?
Can I, one quick second, to address your question, Fred. Actually, maybe we're not setting the bad precedent in that, in order to get this project done, Pelicans Watch folks are gonna have to put in some money to that too, so.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you're willing to come to the table, meet us halfway, and maybe that's a good approach to this going forward.
That's very similar to what we've already done. Like I say, we petitioned you to tax us, which
Yeah, but it
was a
keeps
strange
going.
petition, but
I agree with you, Fred, but, we've put, I agree with you, but we put,
I know.
I'm not the one I didn't vote on that one.
No, you voted on, didn't vote for it.
I didn't vote for that one.
Yeah.
But since we spent $1 million out there, I'd like to protect it.
Motion on the floor, council, you've all heard it. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Mr. Newberry was opposed, all the other four all voted for it, Peter.
thank you very much for your time again.
Thank you.
And,
Appreciate
we
your
will be
time.
working directly with Peter, or whoever you might
Yes.
work with to move forward in an expeditious manner and to try to get it at the minimum cost and installed as soon as possible. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Rocky, appreciate it.
See.
Item C on the agenda, under new business. I propose that council direct staff to draft recommendations for amendments to Code Section 36-132A to prohibit dwelling construction on certain 50-foot lots for consideration by the planning board. I need a second to this proposal.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion, council? Any further discussion? We talked about this earlier, so is there more you'd like to add to it?
So what are we trying to do, Tom? What's your motion is?
We're trying to come up with a way to handle these 50-foot wide lots. We've got some suggestions and recommendations tonight from members of the audience. We could handle these lots in an ordinance form that allows us to actually enforce what we want to have happen in simplest terms. Yes, Chris?
I think this is a good step, and I think the planning board will come back with their thoughts as well as staff. My one comment and tweak to it might be that in the situations where you do have 50-foot wide lots next to one another with different owners, that's the situation where we keep seeing these variances and we keep accepting the variances. I don't think it's enough just to look at prohibiting dwelling constructions on 50-foot lots. I think it's worth formalizing all these variances that we've gone ahead and every time we're approving for the situations where, let's say, if a homeowner owns let's say the same homeowner owns 3 lots, 3 50-foot lots, they would then have to recombine 2 of them into hundreds, but they're still going to have a piece that's left over. Those individual 50-foot ones that we're just stuck with, we didn't create this problem, that at that point, we would defer to what the Board of Adjustments has already been doing and go with the reduced side setbacks. And let's just not have the Board of Adjustments have to meet during the day, have to pay attorney's costs. Let's just move that past us as part of the same discussion.
Are you saying include in that code the side setbacks for 50-foot lots?
Yes, but for the ones where they're not, let's say, next to one another, you've either got different owners or they're sandwiched between 100-foot lots, give them the ability to do increased setbacks as the Board of Adjustments is going to give them anyway. So let's just get through all of the 50-foot conditions all at once.
So we're talking about 2 issues here. One is two 50-foot wide lots that has 1 house on it. If they tear that house down, then they've got 2 50-foot wide lots. That's what we're asking the town to address. What Mr. Nason is, if I'm understanding him correctly, is if you have an isolated lot somewhere that's only 50 foot wide,
Right.
then address that also. And now, Mr. Nason did not say this, but I have been an advocate of going ahead and making, for those isolated lots, the side setback 10 feet, the same way it was prior to changing it around 2000 to 15 feet in an effort to control large home sizes. I said too much. Did I lose you there?
Yeah. Because I don't see that you can have a side setback for one lot, and if I've got a 100-foot lot, my side setback's a different side setback just because I got a larger lot. You can't vary there. I think that gets into.
Well, actually,
They
you
do that.
probably
They
can
do that all the
because,
time. Yeah.
I understand, but I don't think,
well, anyway,
I think the idea, that what Jim is getting to, and Chris and I have also talked about this, and Sam and I have talked about this, is the 10-foot setback allows the person who has that one straggler lot to build a little bit nicer home. That's all, a little bit nicer home. A home that maybe represents our town better than a 20-foot wide home or a 25-foot wide home.
but it increases density.
Not necessarily.
No, increases,
No.
No,
doesn't change density.
it just makes the house wider. They still have to.
It makes him closer to the guy beside of him, and our lots are side by side.
No, I know what you mean, but of course it makes it does allow them to get closer to potentially the guy next to him.
Let me,
But it doesn't
The
increase
example
density.
is two houses that are on Ocean Boulevard.
let me interject this. Let's do what my motion said do.
Let's do that.
And let the town staff and planning board come back to us with they've heard our conversation. Let's let them come back to us with their recommendations, and then we'll go from there.
Hey, Tom, what I'm hearing you say is you want to prohibit building on any 50-foot lot.
Certain.
What are you saying then?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying propose that the council direct staff to draft recommendations for amendments to Code Section 36-132 to prohibit dwelling construction
But you said.
on certain 50-foot lots. On certain 50-foot lots.
How do
Be
you
specific
define
about what
certain?
Yeah, for Fred.
What does certain mean?
I think he's leaving in the discretion with the staff to come up with that, with the recommendation, and then bring that back to you, and if you don't like what the certain is at that point, then we would
Okay.
change what the certain is.
The example would be the lot that Chris and Gary were just talking about, a lot that's kind of an outlier. That would be a certain kind, maybe have different rules for that lot. No, that's what I want staff and the planning board to come back and tell us.
We could have as many as 3 or 4 different conditions.
We could.
That they're gonna have to address.
Let's let them tell us what they are.
Probably fine with that, Tom.
A motion, second, discussion. All in favor of my motion, council? Indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. One.
I'm not clear on it, so.
One. We have 3 ayes and two not clears, or you have something else you want to add?
Yeah.
I understand
It's just too
sending it,
arbitrary to me.
I understand what you're doing is sending it to clarify, but, you know, I got 2 builders who just spoke, and one that I know's been here forever, and he grew up here, I remember that too, and they told us that section 36-132 pretty much already addresses this, so I think we probably need to clean up some language.
I have the greatest of respect for Mr. Stone. I don't know Mr. Neal, but everything I hear about him is great as well, so I have respect for him, and I know his father. But they're not right on it being precise about what it says. The problem is, when you look at the language, there are definitely issues about where things match up, about conforming and non-conforming and proposed structures. What I do agree with him about is that it can be cleaned up. And what I think everybody wants, and what I would be planning to help Wes with, is that if it's a 50-foot lot that's individually owned in the middle of nowhere, that you don't want to pay for it, so you want people to build on it. Maybe we build in a change setback, maybe we don't, but that's gonna be Wes's concept, what he wants to recommend to you as policy. And then with other lots, that what you wanna do is not trigger it on a proposed structure and make sure that it doesn't have the language about non-conforming next to conforming, but any lots non-conforming in single ownership together with other lots, be they non-conforming or conforming, that they be maximized so that all of them are conforming. You know, so if somebody had 2, you stretch it out to 75 feet or 100 feet. If they had 10 and they're all 50 feet, you can do 5.
Okay, so
But
if I've got.
So that you maximize the recombination so that the lots are as big as they can possibly be. And that's how I would plan to draft it.
So if I got 4 in a row instead of having 4 50-foot lots, they become 200-foot lots based on that. But what if
Well,
I,
at least 200 foot. I mean, you could make them, but you wouldn't want to allow.
well, our code says 100 foot, that's why I said that.
Right, but you would make them a minimum 100 foot, but if somebody wanted to make it a 400 foot lot or a 200 foot lot, then that's fine too. But you don't want 150.
To
well,
never-
the
to
issue
never
comes, do you
be-
want 150 and a 50?
Right.
Is that better than 100 and 100 or better than, so
But that
there are
would-
issues that come up there, but that's what where we'd have to draft. What is the definition of maximizing it? Is it trying to get as many, trying to get all, trying to push them all together? There's some room in there to think about it, but generally, the concept is to maximize putting all those lots together and use as one lot, or at least lots that meet the current standards.
And that also is more in keeping with our land use plan, what Ben just said, getting the lots up to a minimum size of 100 feet in width.
And one thing that's important to understand about where these variances that have come up have fallen into a very particular category. They've had a demolition or a planned demolition that will occur before the lots are sold to different people. Now, the one thing I wanted to point out to Mr. Stone was that isn't one that necessarily triggers the variance rule. What the variance says is if you create your own problem, you don't get the variance. But the statute in 2013 was changed so that if you buy a problem, you're not creating your own. It guarantees you that if you bought the problem and knew about the problem, that you didn't create the problem. So it kind of allows people to sell it and clean up their problem. But the statute sticks you with that. So that's where we've gotten in the situation where at least most of the variances that have come forward have been already demolished and already sold to separate parties. And so they fell completely under the section of you can build a single-family residence here, which is the very first, which they also fell into the section of these are just 50-foot lots owned by separate people that you can't force two entities to combine. So you've got to let them build. So that's why the variances were considered even over with the setback consideration. So just an explanation.
Can I ask one follow-up? Given that in these individual cases, so in these individual cases where there's either different owners next to one another, or this is the last lot between all the other ones. In those situations, now that the Board of Adjustments in a quasi-judicial setting has essentially said, we accept this as a hardship, does it create some sort of legal precedent so that somebody else comes forward and says, we've got similar set of facts, does it essentially, do they get it by default?
No.
If that's the case, okay.
No, they don't get it by default, but it's common that it's treated that way. But there is no legal precedent setting by a Board of Adjustment. But it does.
Would you open yourself up to litigation because you said, well, because you let 5 other people do it, and now all of a sudden I'm going for the same thing?
Or would you let another entity open this board up to litigation?
Yeah.
Is essentially what it is. It may or may not, but it does not guarantee anything by default.
Okay.
And then the one other thing that's important to deal with in the drafting is the question of ownership and drawing that to be not a perfect match between entity names, but between actual ownership and control of the entities that are next to each other. Because, I believe Mr. Stone brought this up at the planning board meeting, but it's, pretty simple to say you got 2 LLCs, you just transfer them one into one and one into the other. The same people control both. You don't want that to be any different than you would have an individual owner who owned both of those lots. So we'll try and tweak that as well.
The thing that I think is the most important thing to keep in mind is all those lots out there, or all those homes, let me rephrase, all those houses or homes that are built on top of 2 50-foot wide lots. What we're trying to address is tear that house down and then build 2 homes on 2 50-foot wide lots. It would essentially you know, not to sound melodramatic or anything, but it could double the density of development
Right.
from, so that's what they're trying to go back and look at, along with maybe some other things. But that's what's brought this whole thing here to our council and the planning board recently here.
You get a better feel for this, Fred.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with what Jim said. Allowing them to go with 2 50-foot lots, it is going to increase the density.
Right.
And I think that that's what the point, the motion is for the staff to come back with a recommendation to not let that happen.
Yeah.
You want to call for a vote, Tom?
He did.
Okay.
Thought we
It passed.
we've got 3 affirmative votes recorded.
Right
Do
now,
you
we
want
have
to?
3. Do you want to change your vote to an affirmative vote, or you
We
want
didn't
to
vote.
leave it where it was?
I didn't really vote.
We didn't vote.
Okay. So let's call for a vote.
All right, I'll call for a
You
vote for
don't,
the
you
second
don't
time.
have to.
We can
It
call for the
passed.
aye, and if they don't say
Yes.
anything for the aye,
Then it becomes an aye.
on unanimous vote. So call for the negative.
We know the rules.
You've already called for the positive vote, so call for
All
the negative.
opposed to this last motion, please indicate by saying aye.
So they made no,
Okay,
they made no
so-
response, so they are a positive vote.
That's
So
right,
it's
I
a
got it.
5-0
It's
unanimous
5-0,
decision.
Peter.
Confused.
We got him.
General public comment. Anybody else wish to speak? Anybody else? George, I'm sure you signed up.
Mr. Mayor, I think you got another agenda item there.
Oh, yeah, the D.
You have another agenda item.
I'm sorry, I apologize. George, give me a few minutes.
George,
Yeah, we had to move down the budget amendment number 11, permit delays, remaining Capitol Street and bulkhead improvement money transferred to capital reserve fund instead of being put back in the undesignated fund balance.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is a recommendation of the staff. It's projected that in the street infrastructure project line, we would have $160,000 left over at the end of this fiscal year. Recall that we can't do all of Yopon, which was approved, and as reported earlier in the year, one of the streets was going to be so costly that we did not have it designed, and that was Juniper at this particular time. So for this year, it was projected that 160 would be left out of that line, which would revert to unassigned fund balance on June 30th if it's left unexpended. Also, it's projected that 35,000 in the bulkhead maintenance line would be left over on June 30th because of the fact we're not able to use it in the Yopon Trail project, which is what we had projected to do last year. So those two amounts equal $195,000. The staff's recommendation is that the council transfer that to its capital reserve fund, so it would be preserved in there and not revert back to unassigned fund balance. You put it in capital reserve fund, you can always pull it out for the purpose for which the capital reserve fund was originally set up, and that's basically any capital project. I did hear the comments earlier. If you want to designate another project now, in April, I will say, in our experience, I doubt very seriously we can get a capital project done between now and June 30th. That being the case, we would be right back to having funds revert. So I don't know what the council might have in mind for another project. I don't think this money would get spent this particular fiscal year. So that's why I would recommend the council put it in its own capital reserve fund. Otherwise, it would revert on June 30th to unassigned fund balance.
Council, I'm comfortable with Heater's recommendation to you, but I'd also welcome any thoughts.
well, my question was, the Juniper Trail project was the next one on the capital improvement list. I thought that was designed 2 years ago.
That is, as we reported in, that the design, well, no, it was not actually designed because of the underground conditions. That's what the engineer advised me. I think at the very first capital improvement committee of this year, he reported to that committee that it was going to take some
think
more
he-
study for underground conditions.
But the initial phase, when we did that section of Juniper, with we had the whole design, because I remember
Yes.
looking at it on the table.
That's
for
right.
that.
And then we did one round of underground testing and then decided that they won't have to go back to the drawing board on a
'Cause what I was
subsurface.
Thinking was, is there a project that we can do and continue and get it done? We've got $195,000 that's on the line. I don't know what second one is. I know Juniper was one. I can't remember what number two was.
I would say that your capital improvement planning committee is meeting tomorrow to come up with recommendations to the council. I mean, and that recommendation could include anything that you might consider now. But our experience so far, I've been here 9 years, I do not see a capital project getting done in 90 days. And that money would revert unless it's legally obligated. I don't see it going under contract in 90 days. So I
But if we
agree,
go
Juniper
ahead
needs to be
and start
done.
that- Okay,
I mean,
I don't have a problem putting it in the capital reserve fund. Just, is there a project, we can't do that Yopon until when, next year?
yeah, and you would be reappropriating, you could reappropriate when you decide on these
What's the
prioritizations.
timeframe on Yopon?
Next year.
When can we actually work on it?
October 15th, I believe.
Okay, I guess my question is there a way to go ahead and start a project? We may not get it done in this fiscal year, but we'll be working on it and get it done through the summer and into the fall.
That's what I'm hoping we can
That's
talk
what
about
Peter-
at the
that's what
Capital
Peter's
Improvements
saying
Committee.
we could accomplish. He's not going to have to pay for it.
Right.
So if we put the money in the capital reserve, it'll be there to use.
I agree with that.
Right, well, that was the motion I made my motion was to adopt what Peter said and do what he asked us to do, which is put that $195,000 in the town's capital reserve and use it exactly as we just talked about.
And direct that capital improvement committee, give him a project to go ahead and start working on?
We'll try, sure. I mean, I've got some ideas, but, we need to meet with
I
the
know.
Capital Improvement
I
Committee.
mean, even the paths.
I mean, we're gonna
That's
have the money to
exactly
do
what I'm
Yopon
thinking.
in the budget next year anyway.
If there's a project that we could start now and finish June 30th, I mean, the
don't think we
CIP
do.
committee,
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, go ahead and, like, Juniper definitely needs work. It's getting worse from the equipment that's been on Palmetto. There's a dip right out in front of that road. So, just saying, there may be a project we can go ahead and move through. So go ahead, I agree with you. Go ahead.
All right, are we in consensus, council, to follow the town manager's recommendation and transfer this $195,000 in the town's capital reserve fund? Can we agree on that?
Give him a
I need a motion. I'm making a motion that we do that and ask for a second.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are you an aye, Fred?
Yeah.
Got it. 1, 2, 3. Everybody's on board. 5-0, Peter.
Give him a project.
All right, let's go back to the next thing, which is public comment again. I got Mike Stone at the top of the list.
All right, addressing 50-foot lots again. I mean, it would be nice if town would try to address what was just passed, allowing for the building and separation of those two 50-foot lots, especially since it was brought before the board and by individuals who had not yet purchased the property and asking for the variances. 2, to request that the town officially state that they understand the intent of 36.132, that 2 or more properties were to be considered as one property, so that all these other properties that are now going under contract by individuals who are likely planning to divide them understand that it is one property and address this as quickly as possible. 3, put a moratorium on any construction on any 50-foot lots. Deal with the setback situation. Address the field situation. If there's any field to go on any 50-foot lot, for example, that all water retention must stay on the property. You've addressed you have a 50-foot lot now where you can build a 5,000 square foot house on that 50-foot lot, but you cannot build a 6,000 square foot house on a 100-foot lot. There's an inequity there. So you need to address the square footage potentially available on a 50-foot lot. That's just a few things. So I would request that the town, if they can legally stop the construction, stop the subdividing of the property that was brought before the planning board, because it was not the current property owner that came before. It was individuals asking if they could get the variance prior to purchasing the property. Property, I believe, has been on the market for 10 years because it was overpriced. And, you know, they could potentially just buy the property and sell it for a higher price because it's a lot. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
George Berry. Good evening, George.
So I wasn't planning on speaking, but I heard some interesting things today, and I just wanted to kind of ask you to give me a little bit more information. The little mini cell towers, and then I heard the thing about the poles are going away, so we're losing poles. They're going to put them on top of poles. Is Verizon willing to work with homeowners so we wouldn't want to have cell tower poles in our street, but some homeowners might be able to put it on their, their structures are fairly high, and they have power, and they wouldn't be unsightly. They looks like, from what I saw, they could go against some house, and then the town wouldn't have the responsibility, but the homeowner might get a little revenue, and it makes the town prettier. Otherwise, we see a whole bunch of poles going up where we probably wouldn't want to have those poles, because we're always trying to get rid of the power poles anyway, and we're going to get, if Verizon wants to put these other poles around in addition to the ones they have, it's just another idea to think about to see if they'd be willing to do that. And the other item is, so I understand a no left turn sometime this summer for turning left on South Dogwood. Is that right?
A trial.
Huh?
A trial.
Yeah, that's great. Good idea. But are you also considering down the eastern direction of 158, no U-turns? Because if you do just the left turn, they're going to be U-turning all down the road. I know you're not going to stop everybody because they're going to turn into the shopping center and make a turn there. But I understand you're trying to discourage them, so I think you need to do, I like the no left turn, but I think you need to carry it a little bit further and do the no U-turns further down, kind of in case they didn't get the message. And then Southern Shores Police and Kitty Hawk Police can generate some revenue because of those who disobey the rules. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
And can I put a plug in for the Boat Club? May I? Well, there's one coming up in June. There's one coming up in June. I give it to you. One coming up in June. There's a heads up. I think I came here before and I was complaining that we haven't done anything about the Kitty Hawk Centera facility going away. Well, that's kind of problematic still with Pasco Tank, but I did talk to the president of the hospital. There is a plan about an urgent care center coming. Okay? And they're going to present that to us at our Boat Club meeting.
Boat Club camp.
In June 14th, when they're ready to have their stuff together. So it's good news for us.
Thank you, George. Yes, Sam.
Mr. Councilman, take up the recommendations from the planning board on the commercial design standards in ZTA 1801 on shared parking this evening.
Give me those dates again. Wes, you got them?
No,
You won't do it tonight. The planning board should take tonight.
Okay.
Is the council going to take action on those tonight? One is, setting up a task force on commercial design standards, and the second one is action on ZPA 18-01 on the shared parking.
Mr. Mayor, I want to remind council, the practice is that the planner would get with the mayor. He's made the recommendations, and the mayor would go ahead and authorize the planner to set public hearing on those recommendations.
Is that all right with you, Sam, if we do it that way?
Yes, I just
All right.
didn't know whether you were going to take up action.
I'm-
But
There is no action.
we don't have to make
You
it,
don't have to do anything.
okay, I'm just.
We can announce a public hearing later. We'll let you,
It
we'll
might
do
be-
that.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. I have no further comments. Council members? Mr. Nason?
No comments.
Gary? Fred?
Yeah, I have one. Council received an email today from Claire Sutton, and I think she was representing the people on Fairway Drive. And her concern was she made a presentation at an earlier meeting to the council, and I think I brought this up again last meeting. And we decided that it would go to the Capital Improvement Committee to address it. And her complaint is the fact she's gotten no response whatsoever. So I think we do owe her a response and explain to her what the process is. So I recommend that we direct the staff to respond to Claire's original presentation.
CIP committee meets tomorrow, and we've asked the previous meetings to consider this, and they come back to the committee with their ideas and their recommendations. So by tomorrow, we'll have something. We'll have to come at that point back to council.
But I think her point is she's received no response whatsoever. If we could just merely say, hey, you're working, it is better than no response at all. I think her point is we're being pretty rude about it.
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
I'll take care of that. Jim? Any further comments?
No, no comments.
All right.
Make a motion with adjourn.
Your name, if you want to say.
No, I don't.
You already asked me.
All right. You make-
I said I made a motion with adjourn.
I got a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
I second.